It's live, and so am I, and so are we. Hello, everyone. Can you hear and see everything okay? I don't know how that guitar came through. That's over there, 10 feet from the mic. First things first, Chris from Cleveland. Yes, I'm glad you're ready to get all that finalized. I'll give you a call later today or tomorrow. Hello, everyone. Brad, how the hell are you, man? How you doing, champion? Steve from New Orleans. Good to see you. I need to get back there soon. Denmark. Hey, Ken. Scotland. We've got Scottish weather here, though we've got Scottish summer weather. It's about 50 and drizzly. Hey, Federico. I'll get to the question about the 57 deluxes and twins in a little bit. Is the guitar audible at all? Because sometimes at low level stuff it gets real grainy through the weird compression on this. Zurich, Denver, Isle of Wight. An Irish hello from Darren Farrell. And Gringo, of course, from Scotland. Edward LaRose from East Tennessee. Well, West Tennessee, right back at you there. Charlotte, North Carolina. And Sebastian, Florida. Anyone, could you hear the guitar at all? Yeah, just, I don't know how that sounds until I listen to it back. Topeka. Good old Knoxville in Vermont and Phoenix. Cool. I'd like to talk about something before we get into amp questions, because it's frustrating when you try to put demos of things, not like demos, but this is what the amp sounds like. This is what the really only one time by the time I went live, only one note. Really, that sucks. I'll do it later. Whether I'm doing an amp, whether I'm doing a Marshall, a Fender, one of those little the audio, universal audio, the Ruby and the Dream. People consistently say, man, that's not what it sounds like for me, or that doesn't sound very good. Everything else I've heard on YouTube sounds great, or have you even played a Marshall, et cetera, et cetera. And hey, everyone, I've not said hello to yet, but it's frustrating because at the one hand, I want to be like, I've been doing this a long time. I've played many more amps than most people get to play, and I get to hear a large sampling of really good, well sought after amps. So from that perspective, and having played 30 years, yeah, I know what I'm talking about, but I don't want to have that automatic knee-jerk defensive thing. And getting demonstrations across on YouTube can be very difficult. Not only the fact that most people are not used to hearing a single SM57 dry on a Marshall, because most recorded tracks with Marshalls, at least two different microphones, some padding, a lot of EQ, a lot of compression. Most of the regular guitar channels out there, and that can be any channel. This is not a slam, but whether it's Beato or Rhett Schull or Paul Davids, Pete Thorne. Most of these guys have studio setups, and they're not showing what an amp sounds like. They're showing a sculpted tone. Tim Pierce. So they have cabs a lot of times in a different room, or they'll have load boxes and IRs, and there's compression, and there's EQ, and more than one mic as necessary. And so what you get out of that is like what you can make an amp sound like in a studio. And I'm trying to show you as close as possible what the amp sounds like in the room. Granted, that's 157 close mic, because if I put a U87 here 6 feet away from it, even a very expensive mic doesn't hear an amplifier the way our ears do. And you'd hear a lot of the room, and the room's small, and there's a lot of metallic things that vibrate, and there are a lot of reflective surfaces. So I'm trying to find a balance, but when it comes to a Marshall, if I play a class 5, not a class 5, an Origin 20, and I think I had a Les Paul in that video, and I've got it dialed up to Marshall levels, and I hit an A chord. If it doesn't feel or sound like a Marshall, I don't want to keep playing the damn thing. That's not a plexi. That's not a Marshall. That Vintage 20, the Studio Vintage 20 the other day, it had some really good sounds, a little bit exaggerated bright even for a plexi circuit, but due to the low B plus, the criminally cold bias, it just was really compressed and had a little bit of fizz when you pushed it, and it got a little grainy. And then that 10-inch speaker didn't do any favors. And people are like, well, run it through a 4x12. Yes and no. I was demonstrating the sound of the combo, the $1,900 combo that Marshall sells. And so that's what that speaker sounds like. And when I listen back, I'm in the room and then I hear the playback. And before you guys hear it, if I don't think that the recorded sound that I'm getting with the 57 is close enough to what I hear in the room to be an accurate reflection, I redo it. Everything I've put out in the last year or so, I've gone to great lengths to make sure that what you guys hear is as close as possible without compression, without EQ, without all the sweetening and limiting and stuff. And I know how to do all that, but I'm giving you as close to an accurate representation as I can. Certainly, I don't have the world's best gear, and part of that's a little bit on purpose. I mean, I've got this little Focusrite Scarlett 2i2. I think it's $150 right now. An SM57 is $75. I've got an Atlas stand, so $50 for the stand, $20 for an XLR. That's a very real world setup that a lot of people either have or have comparable to. So if you hear the 57 through the relatively inexpensive USB mic pre and it sounds good to you, think how much better it will sound in the room. Whereas if I were to do everything with a Royer R121 and a Sennheiser M160, and I had an Apogee, or I had name your expensive gear here, well, maybe some Neve stuff and API stuff, and I just start to say, well, I'll just give it that little tweak. I won't tell anyone. I'll just give it that little shelving trick or whatever. My God, everything would sound amazing, but it'd be really hard for you to replicate that with the amp in the room. So that's one level of the problem I have. The other is on the hey robot songs. Thanks so much, man. On the Dream and the Ruby, I try to be very fair. The Dream sounded pretty close in a lot of ways to a deluxe reverb. It didn't feel the same, but it sounded quite good. The Ruby was farther from the mark. You could get good sounds. It did not sound like an AC30 to me. I thought the normal channel was really blah, and the tremolo was good. As like I said, you can make music with it, but those don't sound like Vox. That did not sound like a Vox to me. And people are like, "Man, it sounds so much better for me through the same setup, or it sounds so much better on this other guy's channel." Am I missing some magic here? And I even had someone say on the Dream and the Ruby, "Oh, you can't run those direct into a digital interface in your computer. You're supposed to run it through the effects loop of an amp through some cabs, or a power amp and some cabs." I'm like, well, first of all, that introduces a whole bunch of other variables with what speakers, what amp are you using? So my results may not match yours. Second of all, the selling point of those pedals is that you can just plug them into a mic pre and record straight in your computer. So that's what I was doing. You saw me move all the knobs with a good sounding Strat. That's what those things sound like. What am I missing? What can I do to make the world a better place from your perspective? So I'm going to now stop talking and read your replies. Joachim Jonker says, sorry, Lyle, the U.S. soccer team lost against the Netherlands. Do we have a soccer team? Did anyone watch that? Sorry. So all that, and I get a few replies agreeing with me, no one disagreeing, and people asking amp questions. I thought this might be more of a discussion. Um, I mean, it really does weigh on my mind. I want to get to the point where if I say, "Hey, this is what this amp sounds like," you know, that's what that amp sounds like with those settings, with this guitar in this room. But it's harder than I thought. Uh, Richard Nagamitsu says you're sounding apologetic. I'm not trying to sound apologetic. Sorry. But at the same time, I don't want to be so full of myself that I assume that I'm doing everything right if I'm missing something. I mean, you guys are hearing the videos. You don't. You're not making the decisions in the room. So, what's the best way to put this? I'm hearing it based on what I have heard in real life. You're hearing it tabula. You have a blank slate approach to this when you hear it, and you listen to all the other channels. Do you notice a big discrepancy between my recordings and the channels that just stick a mic in front of an amp rather than having delay and reverb on everything? Brad says maybe some dynamics to simulate what the ear does in the room. You mean add some compression? Because I mean the 57 is a dynamic. Um, a room mic would uh, um, make you hear too many early reflections and sound very mid-rangey, boxy. Yeah, the YouTube compressions and thing, I try to meet their criteria. Actually, I'm lower than their criteria. I'm aiming for an average loudness on the voice of -23 versus their proposed -18, and I keep my voiceover peaks at -3. And because I'm not adding any compression to the amp, occasionally I'll do some level matching just so the quiet stuff isn't terribly quieter than the loud stuff, particularly on a particularly on a non-master volume amp. But I'll set that so that maybe it peaks at -1.5, and the average level, average peak would be more like -3. David S. Says the audio usually has an in-your-face feel, not a bad thing, but yeah, perhaps a little compression. I mean, the guitar, I do compress the vocals. There's no compression on this because it introduces a lag. I'll be playing around with that later. But everything that all the videos where I do the voiceover, um, um, I do have compression on that, about 4 to 1, and then a limiter just to so I can bump it up without it peaking any weirdnesses. And the flip side of that is the past couple weeks was the weather's changed. I've had some congestion, and that compressor can sometimes make me sound like I've got asthma. Yeah, and there's also the thing of people listening on a cell phone, especially when I'm like, "Hey, did you hear that low end?" And you can't hear the low end through a cell phone, even a good one. You have to use headphones or real speakers. Well, I do left 23 for the voiceover. I don't do the left thing on the guitars, because I think that's a little unnatural, and I think the goal for music is uh, is a little bit different than the left for voiceover. No, Chris's random guitar. It's possible the voice mic is picking up the guitar on its own. No, I always go through if I'm doing a a real playing video where you can hear the amp through a mic. The vocal mic is muted when you're hearing the mic on the amp. And sometimes I even remember to pause between speaking and playing so I can do that more easily. Ryan, Jacqueline, we'll get to those some amp questions in a little bit. I really want to beat this dead horse apparently for a bit first. But real fast on yours, he says, "Hey Lyle, I have a 65 AC30, and on the top boost channel only, the volume goes from 0 to extremely loud with no in between. What do you think this could be?" That's very possibly a bad volume pot where the wiper, it just it doesn't have continuity, and so when the wiper's down at ground, it's muting the next stage, and as soon as that wiper moves off that lug, it doesn't have a path, and so you have just no attenuation there. That's what I would look at first because it's an inexpensive, simple solution, and also very likely. Yeah, production. I can make everything sound beautiful, but I'm not here to be beautiful. Occasional voice mic clipping. Yeah, Red Horse Reincarnated says I listen on my phone and the audio is always fine except for occasional voice mic clipping. Um, I'm using an app to record the videos, and it's got a new version out, which seems to have some promise, but it only came out 2 days ago. The previous version, I had fine control of everything related to the camera, but just a very crude slider for the mic level, and sometimes it will be slightly off. It's hard for me to be consistent on that for the lav mic, and the lav mic will clip sometimes. Yeah. A little compression on the guitar might work well. Yeah, I've struggled with that. There was an app last week I did where I added a little room mic sound. No one complained about it. I'm just trying to kind of soften the blow for those unused to hearing a true dry recording. Compression can be slippery because it also means that I can't tell you as much about the amp's dynamic range. That said, I've cheated that a little bit just by saying, all right, I did the clean strat part of this demo, with the amp on 3, and then I did the Les Paul with amp on 8. I need to bring up everything on the clean stuff so that it peaks at like -3, leave the distorted stuff so it peaks at -1. So I'm kind of roughly doing compression, but within that clean strat demo, there's no compression. And within the dirty sound, there's no demo. So any playing dynamics do come through. That's the bargain I'm at with myself right now. And because I understand that if I were to compare a Princeton reverb to a 100-watt Marshall in the same video, you either hear the Marshall and you don't hear the Princeton at all, or you hear the Princeton and the Marshall kills you. We have to adjust for the dynamic range of the medium in this case, because if you're in the room, your ears can hear that huge range. William Bach says, "Are you not satisfied with the demo sound, or do a lot of people have complaints?" I'm increasingly satisfied with it. Um, but at the same time, I'm increasingly tempted to add a little sweeteners here and there. But yeah, people have been complaining a lot, and some of them I think are absolute BS. But at the same time, I can't just throw out all complaints because how dare they not agree with me? Don't they understand the value of the wisdom that I'm imparting to them? So I just try not to take myself so seriously. So that's why I did this today. I wanted to talk to you about a bunch of you. A lot of you guys have been long-term subscribers. You watch the channel. You're invested in your tone. You're aware of all the other videos out there in YouTube land. Keep me honest. Tell me your thoughts. Yeah, Brad's like, there's no way you can demonstrate the dynamic range of a cranked high watt. Yeah. I mean, if I set it so that the loudest stuff is at -1, so it doesn't clip all the digital, the quietest stuff is at -30, and then you play that on YouTube, and the compression just makes all the low bit stuff crunchy and quiet. What about mic placement? David S says, I try to be very consistent with that. I have found that in general, now this is a rule of thumb for in general, and this is not the only way. A 57, about half an inch or an inch off the grill cloth, aimed straight onto the speaker, at the transition from the dust cap to the cone gives a fairly accurate representation of what the amp sounds like. Now, we don't listen with our ear an inch from the grill cloth, but neither do our ears work like a microphone does. There are people who do angles, and I've done a video about a year ago when I was showing different ways, addressing this issue of showing how much difference moving the mic on the same speaker makes. I'm aware of it. I found that this gives a consistent sound and means that every amp, every speaker that I mic, I start off there. And sometimes it sounds bad, and I'll have to make slightly adjustments. Moving, if it has like an aluminum dust cap, I'm not doing that. But it's at least consistent from amp to amp and speaker to speaker. Edward LaRose says, ignore the complainers. And that's always tempting. But like I said, I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. If there's some legit complaints, legit areas where I can improve, I want to know them. Red Horse Reincarnated says, I don't know why people are complaining. Have you met the internet? Oxen says, good day. Fine, sir. How are your hands doing? Love the body foil install. What's your take on tone difference apart from EME rejection? My hands, this is fine, though these fingers are a little bit stiff. I've got some pains in the wrist and right around this knuckle. It keeps coming and going. Thank you for asking. I guess now would be a good time to talk about this. This is a preview for the guys here today. I haven't done the second video on this. This is that guitar that I shielded, and it's not done. I've got to do some nut work to it, but it's got the new Godot bridge, and I took out. Brad will understand what I'm talking about. The idiot who did this nut had it, the witness point at the back of the nut, not at the front edge of the nut. The whole nut was sloped down this way. It's supposed to sloping down this way. So the high E string especially was sitaring. But let me know if you guys can hear this. So you can hear I guess you can't really hear it from on the video. Maybe you can. There's 60 hertz when I'm on the neck, and it goes away if I rotate, which is always the case. If I go to the 2 or 4 positions, all the 60 hertz goes away. And this thing's got tons of high end, even though it's fully shielded. I can't play like Beato up here. It's weird. Well, this nut is still not installed very well. If I were to show you the gaps down here, it's very uneven bottom surface, but it's a lot better than it was, and it has a string tree that doesn't make everything go ping. When you hear this for real, you'll hear tons of high end. Good shielding does not make a guitar sound dark and dull. If you shield the inside of the pickup covers, you can have that issue. Anyway, I'm sure that doesn't sound that great, but it does work really well. RCKX says, a good resource is someone who records, and posts demos on YouTube. That's kind of me. Have I asked an established YouTube demo person? Also asked Gafford at the shop for some feedback. Yeah, I got one of Chris's amps in the other room to just got in today. It's an old crate. Look for that later this week. I've had absolute monster pro guitarists come in and do playing videos here, and people don't watch the playing videos. Steve Selvage, he plays with the Hold Steady, plays with um, um, Tommy Stinson when he's not in Guns N' Roses. All these things, really great player. He did a playing video of a '76 Marshall Super Lead, and he brought his brand new red telly, and he said, "What do you want me to play?" And I said, "Man, I think the world's got enough uh, Eddie Van Halen tributes on YouTube. Plug in the amp, turn it, fiddle with the knobs, see what sounds speak to you, and you just play what you want, because I'm not going to tell a great player what to play." And he messed with it for about 10 minutes, and he was warming up and finding tones, and I pressed record, and he proceeds to absolutely nail all these fantastic sounds straight off physical graffiti, like Down by the Seaside, all these great sounds. And some dumb MFer posts on that video, "Where'd you get this chicken shit, this chicken fried country shit? That's a Marshall. Play some rock and roll." All right, motherfucker, that's called Led Zeppelin. Okay? So let's just get real. But, I've had Joe Restivo playing jazz. None better. Logan Hanna, Steve Selvage. I've had really great players come in and play things. John Bass with the ES 340 a couple weeks ago with that Matchless. In general, the playing videos, even the ones with great players, don't get the views that, "Hey, this blues junior tried to steal my girlfriend." So it's kind of frustrating. Um, so much bird's eye. Yeah, I talked to the owner. It's a Warmouth body and a Warmouth neck. He's had a long time. He almost sent the body back because when he got it, you could see the grain lines through the blue sparkle, and he's really glad he didn't, because that means it's a fairly thin finish for a blue sparkle, and it's a really resonant, good guitar. It really does need to be refretted, or at least recrowned, though I think they're low enough that a refret's the answer. But not having that old bar go ping, 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 ping all the time because all the threads were stripped, and not having it off the body at a weird angle. Anyway, details on that will come in a second video. Zach Childs uses his iPhone for the video and his wife's iPhone for the audio, even when he plays. Keep it simple. It's much more fun not worrying about all the technical crap. Yes and no. And I love Zach's videos. He's a really great guy. Spoken to him a few times. In those videos, you'll notice he'll have his amp. Well, I don't have a deluxe reverb behind me right now. He'll have his amp volume on 2. So he's really playing very low level in those videos. And the iPhone mic in the room picks that up fine. So he's got his voice and he's got the guitar. Everything balances pretty well. Probably has the iPhone level compensation active. And you can do that if you have a deluxe reverb or Princeton with the volume on 2. You can't do that with a Marshall 50 watt. The iPhone mic will just compress the hell out of everything and exaggerate the room sound. It can sound really exciting, but it's not accurate. I have a video up here showing the exact same part done with some Marshalls, what the 57 heard versus what the phone heard. And the phone sounds exciting. It sounds awesome, but it doesn't sound like what's actually coming out of the amplifier. So if I were only doing a deluxe reverb with the volume on 2 all the time, like Zach does, I could dial it way back. But I've got to show the loud, difficult stuff as well. Yeah, I've seen those string retainers that hold the G down as well. I don't find that the G string retainer is usually necessary on a Strat. The B and E are. The G, you can just do an extra wind or two typically if the nut's cut properly. And I'm not arguing with Joe Glazer, but I don't think it's necessary most of the time. Which amp are you playing through? It's a about a week ago, I guess I did the first video diagnosing it. It's a AC15 C1, the custom series with a greenback for a friend of mine. It's done, but in fact, it's Steve Selvage. He's playing with the Hold Steady in Brooklyn all this week. So when he comes back, he can do a playing video of this amp that no one will watch because YouTube is crazy. So it has a few little tweaks I've done, though. What you just heard there was had those tweaks off. It's a good sounding amp. AC15 C1. I gig with one tomorrow, and he's gigging with a rental one in Brooklyn all week. Thanks, Brad. Yes, Steve is a great player. He's a cool guy, and he's bringing me Christmas cookies when he comes to get this amp. So I love him very much. Scroll down too fast. Hey, Christopher Butler. He says he narrowed down the issue he's having with his antenna effect buzz, even with humbuckers. Legacy electric circuits in my house have it. New run electric circuits don't. So yeah, I said in that video that is probable that you had a problem with the ground or the wiring or something to do with the circuit in your house. And I was thinking about that. One of the things I meant to mention last time, but because you'd ask something, then 30 minutes later I'd answer that, and then ask you a question about it, and then 30 minutes later I'd see what you'd replied, just due to the nature of things on the live stream. He said it didn't do it with modelers or headphone amps, and the difference there is a modeler or headphone amp typically does not have a grounded power cable. It's going to be running off isolated DC. And that was the other big clue to me that I did not specifically mention in the video last week. All the devices that you had the problem with are using 120 volts from the wall and your ground. All the devices that you did not have a problem with, they're probably using 9 or 12 volt DC isolated supplies. So. Is it still working? Lost it for a minute. Are we? Everyone seeing this now? Okay, cool. Sorry, for some reason my phone and the laptop lost sync with each other. All right. I'm afraid that I am getting behind again. Brad says, I'm going to move the mic so you can hear it. Brad says, I think a lot of people comment while drunk. They get punched in real life. I've had both those thoughts a few times in the history of doing this channel. Some commenters go way above and beyond what's necessary for the points they need to make. And I'm a pretty big guy. And in real life, people tend to be pretty polite to me. Let's see here. Oxen thinks that room mics seem to work best for videos. In my living room, where I used to do all my videos, that would be the case. A room mic in there would be fantastic. If anyone wants to send me a U47, I'll set up an Omni and we'll just have a good old time. But I'm trying to keep as much as possible from infecting the rest of the house. I'm trying to keep all this stuff in here. And this is a relatively small room. Oh, about 14 by 18 maybe, with 10 or 11 foot ceiling. So not tiny by a lot of cities standards, but not a great big sound. And I've got all these metal racks with chassis and bits and bobs and things that like to vibrate. You would hear it. John L says, hey, Lyle, in a previous video, I believe you mentioned you have a 500K volume pot in your EJ Strat. What does that do for a Strat? Well, I have Kinman noiseless pickups in that Strat. And with the Kinmans, the 500K is nice. And in the other Strat, the Rosewood Strat with the Sir Thornbucker, I have a 500K in that as well. I used to have Sir Thornbucker in the bridge and Sir VLP 60s in the neck and middle. And I had that 500K volume pot, and then had the super switch wired so that when it went to any of the single coil positions, a 500K resistor was put in parallel, which gave them a 250K volume pot. But I never really enjoyed the 60 cycle hertz that I got with those Sir pickups, even though they're great sounding single coils. So I changed those out for some Mojo Tone Quiet Coil 67s. And I went with the 67s because I already have the 50s sound in the Kinman in the other Strat. And I wanted that slightly brighter sound of the late 60s pickups. They seem to do it, but the Mojo Tones specifically are stacked humbuckers or side by side. I'm not sure how they actually do it. And they sound better with the 500K pot. So both my Strats have 500K volume pots. Thanks, Anthony Bust. He says, super interesting stuff. Used to be interesting stuff, but then it ducks into a phone book and it's super interesting stuff. Looks like a flasher. Do I have any views on staggered pole pieces on Strats? Yes, some have them, some don't. Historically, you can see that the stagger on these pickups, these are custom shop Texas specials. You can see that this is higher on the G and B than certainly than on the E and B. Sorry, the G and D. A little bit lower on the A, then thicker on the low E, higher on the low E. When this was designed, this G was a wound string. These were all flat wounds. All from G, D, A, and E were flat wounds, and the G was wound. And so that pole piece was raised to get more output from a flat wound G string. And then with the switch to a plain G with round wounds, that G actually gets kind of loud. If I try to pick every string at equal volume, that G kind of jumps out at you. And a lot of guys have just who played Strats a lot have kind of learned to adjust for that, where you might go. You can adjust for it. Of course, that's to an amp that's set very clean, where you're going to hear that big dynamic change more. You play into a cranked Marshall, you're going to have less difference because that'll just be in the zone of compression, and it can actually make the attack have a little more articulation. So it's not designed it to do. Jeremy Green says, hey, Kyle. Jeremy Green, my name is Lyle. I will thank you to observe the proper pronunciation, but I'll humor you and answer your question anyway. I have tried out several treble bleed circuits on the volume pot of my guitars, but they all seem to mess with the taper too much. Any way to fix this? Yeah, absolutely. There are better and worse sounding treble bleed circuits out there. In general, the ones where you have a resistor and capacitor in series with each other tend to be the most natural, but they're all compromises. Whenever possible, I prefer just to do 50s wiring, which means that the tone circuit, instead of being connected to the input, the pickup side of things, is connected to the output side of things. So on the volume pot, instead of hanging the tone control off the input, you hang the tone control to the wiper, So that as this is turned down, it's on 10, they're all together. It's not going to be a difference when it's on 10. As you turn it down, say this is a 250K pot and I turn it halfway down. I've got 125K, 125K. The 125K is between the pickup and the tone control. It means the tone control then loads down the pickup less as you turn this down. For reasons that I don't have time to get into right now, that gives a lot of the same benefit as a treble bleed circuit, and you can have a natural sound as it's rolled down. I would demonstrate, but this guitar is not wired that way because the owner did not want anything changed on it. My other Strats are wired that way, but even if I demonstrated that right now, you wouldn't really necessarily hear it with the amp over there. There is a great video on this and other similar circuits questions from a company called A2 Guitars. Look for A2 Guitars, pots, tone controls. It'll come up and he shows, hey, this is how a linear taper volume pot works. This is how an audio taper volume pot works. This is what happens when you have this tone cap value. This is when you have this tone cap value. This is what happens with 50s wiring. This is what happens with modern wiring. These are different treble bleed circuits. Here's what a peak resonance frequency is and how it shifts as you move the tone pot, how that works with your amp. It's really great. He shows the whole thing on a scope. He shows the whole thing on graphs. Really in depth and really useful. Steve Kozlowski says, where are you based out of? I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. Hold steady, rocks. Steve rocks. Yes, he does, Richard. Hey to my homies in the Twin Cities, he says. Gooden says, so then does a typical smartphone mic have an EQ processing effect that's on all the time and makes music or an amp sound bigger than life? It can. There is something called automatic gain control, at least on the iPhone, and it's in the Galaxies, the Samsung Galaxies as well. I've not used the Google Pixels or some of the others, but I've used the most recent Samsung's Galaxies and the most recent iPhones. It's a compressor. So it says, whatever signal is coming in, I want it to record at this level. So you have a really loud signal, it turns it down to that level. You get a real quiet signal, it brings it up to that level. And if you go back and listen to videos I made about 2-3 years ago, where I was recording everything with the Samsung Galaxy I had, you can hear that effect. Like the reverb on anything I'm recording sounds exaggeratedly long and deep. Because, all right, you're playing, here's the note, it's bringing it down so that it doesn't distort the mic. But then as the reverb trails off naturally in the room, the phone is actually bringing the level up. So the reverb trails off and then stays like that until there's nothing else. So go back and listen to a video from 3 years ago. With any Fender amp with the reverb, you'll hear that sound. And compression, even crude compression like that, sounds louder to us. And we like that because our ears will naturally compress, but only if something is very, very loud. And we associate all those acoustic cues with something being exciting. That's probably because a long time ago, anything really loud was a potential risk to us, a potential hazard, something that stood out from its environment was a potential. Are hardwired for that. And at the same time, it's like candy to our brains. So our ears will naturally compress, but only when something is very loud and exciting. But all those little artifacts of compression, even from an iPhone, even from a Samsung recording, our brain still interprets that, hey, that's a cue that's loud. That's a cue that's exciting. And that's why people compress the hell out of things. Anthony Best says, I've started to hear a lot of the noise in several of the expensive high-end digital pedals. So thanks for pointing out, kind of. Yeah, man, I'm sorry. Once you hear it, it's hard to unhear it. Oh man, I've missed some good stuff here. Let me scroll down a little bit. It's All right, John Williamson, you're gonna have to explain yourself. You said, "Just clickbait the AC-15C1, no sleep since Brooklyn." I'm not sure what you mean. That you're always posting really scientific comments. Um, so I assumed you're really saying you wanted me to hear someone say "No sleep till Brooklyn," so I did that. Sorry about the momentary drop off. Oh, Brad says, "Don't let Lyle gloss." Clicked over 30K subscribers. Um, Thanks, man. I haven't glossed over it. I just haven't had a chance to do an adequate response on that to everyone. So I will say to you here, thank you very much. And I will be doing something soon to, um, as an official thank you for that. Hopefully, by the time I get time to do that, I'll have 32,000. It's, I've got so many things to do. I've got so many apps that have just come in, for which I am grateful. So the audio never dropped out, though. Oh, well, the audio is from source and the videos from the camera. I'm wondering why the camera dropped out. I wonder if it's the USB cable. Thanks, Nola Rocks. That's very much appreciated. John Holcomb retracted a message. It always makes me curious what I missed. Matt Johnson says, "Hey, Lyle, thanks for doing another one of these. Is there any delay pedal you recommend for early U2 tone, the Boy October era, since I'm hesitant to invest in a vintage Memory Man?" That gets tricky because I'm not sure of everything that's on the market today. I would not spend the money on an old Memory Man because they are very noisy, fragile things, um, and the good ones are artificially high. I know that you got to break that sound down into two different things. There's the preamp, which is a TLO 72 based preamp in the Memory Man, and you probably would get pretty close with an EP boost or similar. And then there's the actual delay sound, which is modulated. And I don't know your budget. If someone were to say, "Hey, I want that sound, but I don't want to get the old thing," the Keeley Halo does a great job of that. You might be satisfied with the little Line 6 or TC delays. The Flashback actually does a pretty good modulated analog delay sound, and it's not good enough to my ears to do an SED3K or a 2290 delay because you don't have the fine control over the modulation that those units had. But you could do just an analog modulated thing like that. Maybe does the little MXR carbon copy have modulation? Anyway, the Memory Man is more complex than the carbon copy, though. So I would probably say the Flashback X4 or the back is where it would start, and the Keeley Halo would be ideal. And then just pair it with a nice preamp like the EP Booster. Ron Quest Main says, "One of my best tools for building amps is a reactive load. I have Sir Reactive Load with IR and 2 Notes Capture X. I love my speakers, but man, it saves my ears and the wife. Your thoughts?" If I were doing this to record music and the focus of my channel were the music I was making, all those things would be very appealing to me. Um, and I may do something like that down the line, um, as in a way to demonstrate very loud amps without the neighbors hearing. But in general, I want to demonstrate what the amp sounds like in an acoustic space, number one, which is how most people still experience these things. Number two, playing at relatively high decibels reveals a lot of problems with an amp um, that won't happen if you have the simulated out, just because there's no acoustic vibration of things. And so I need to punish everything to know that this truly is healthy. A lot of times I've discovered problems in amps that I would never experience if I were listening all with IRs and stuff. It has to shake and bake. Dustin Thiessen says, I'm always a fan of a Heil PR30 on a guitar amp, much more accurate sounding than a 57. There are a lot of a lot of microphones that are probably better choices if I was trying to make an album. I chose a 57 very deliberately because it is the French vanilla of the amp recording world. Everyone either owns a 57 or has used one a lot. You know what it sounds like. I think that most pedal demos should always be done with a deluxe reverb for that same reason. Just a very common basis of comparison. Before you spend $200-300 on a pedal, you need to know what it sounds like through a deluxe reverb. That tells you a lot more than running it through some amp you've never heard, and the amp's already distorted before they even turn the pedal on, and they have delay and all this nonsense. So while you may think a different mic is a better choice for recording guitar than an SM57, if you hear a demo of an amp and you know where the mic is placed, you have a pretty good idea what it actually sounds like. And you may even think, well, if it sounds that good with the 57, imagine what it sounds like with my mic of choice here. Jatuka asked, do you personally prefer cathode bias or fixed bias amps when playing really loud? Depends what you mean by really loud. An AC30 is a really loud amp. And it's cathode biased, but that's about as loud as you're going to get out of a cathode biased amp typically. It draws a lot of current to do that. To do anything louder than that takes monster transformers. Fixed bias draws a lot less current. So as the wattage goes up, typically, so everything goes to fixed bias. So are we talking in a room loud, or are we talking on a large stage loud? Because Dave Grohl plays arenas. His loud is not your loud, is not my loud. That said, Dave Grohl uses AC30s an awful lot, and he's not relying on the amp for stage volume anymore. Everything's in ears and additional monitors and stuff. So it really comes down to the tone you want, and you'd have to play both. You'd pretty quickly realize, oh, I'm a Marshall 100-watt guy, or I'm an AC30 guy, or like most of us, I'm both, and that's why I'm always broke. William Bach says, would you choose a WGS Veteran for an inexpensive 10-inch and an AA 764 build? That'd be a fine choice. Any of the WGS 10-inch speakers would sound good in that. I think the G10C would probably be the most authentic choice for that, though it wouldn't actually, no, the Veteran would be pretty good because the Veteran would sound a little bit like the Oxfords. Luis de Jesus says lace sensors. Oh, you like lace sensors. Bless your heart. I used to have lace sensors. I no longer have lace sensors. Hey, Scott, thanks very much. Appreciate that. Richard asked, when's the next cast iron cooking demo going to be? I'm not sure. I might use some cast iron to do some Yorkshire puddings for Christmas. Probably too busy eating them than to video them. Des Vegas says, I have an old PV Series 260C bass amp, 15-inch speaker, and it makes a high-pitched metallic resonance when I play on B or E. What gives? Well, I don't have any experience with that particular model. Um, I assume, are you talking about are you playing guitar or bass? Are you talking a low B? Or are you talking the B on a guitar? Because that's a very different thing. But if you're playing a 5-string bass, you mean your low B string or your E string, and you get a high pitched metallic resonance, it may just be that something in the amp or the chassis is not tight. Yeah, the pixely freezing video I watched back last week's, and there's some parts there where I was real pixelated, and I don't know what the difference is. I pay extra for very fast uh, Wi-Fi, but here we are at the mercy of AT&Ts and Comcasts of the world. John Holcomb, thank you very much. I'm trying to get to a minor stopping point so we can all take a 4-minute break at the hour mark. 70s, late 70s pull boost Fiberlux reverb. Yeah, just don't use the pull boost. Speaker recommend black facing. It's not really that necessary, but it's fine if you want to do that. They didn't make that many changes to the late 70s Fiberlux reverb. You can make it pretty much just like a 66 pretty easily. Speaker recommendations. Are you playing hyper clean? Then I would go with the G10Cs. If you're playing dirtier stuff, the veteran 10s, the ET 10s, or if you want to look into some of the Eminence Alessandros, or even might be a good choice, a pair of the Celestion G10 Golds. If you want the Alnico thing, those would be the most expensive. Hey, Teeth. Thanking me for the staggered poll piece response. Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. Leo was designing the guitars for a totally different purpose than how we use them. Leo, in all his amps, he wanted clean headroom. I was thinking about this yesterday when I was doing that Gibson video. If you go back to the 50s Gibson amps, especially the Les Paul models, those things had no clean headroom whatsoever. So they were putting these amps out with Les Paul's name on them, and Les Paul would never, ever use those things. He was plugging into hi-fi stuff basically at the time because he could not use the Gibson amps because they had no clean headroom whatsoever. We, of course, today love CF58 GA18T because it has no headroom and it breaks up and it's really raunchy. That was not what the amp was designed to do. And then the apparently 64 or 65 GA5T from yesterday, they put that T-notch filter in there specifically to make it brighter, to give it that mid-range scoop, and to give it as more clean headroom than the amp previously had. Because in 64, 65, Gibson's idea of the sound people would want today, those kids today, was Trini Lopez. You all have your Trini Lopez albums. I know you do. You're all teenagers just really jamming out to Trini Lopez. That was Fender in the 60s. I mean, Gibson in the 60s. We got the clean headroom stuff right, pretty much starting with the 63 amps, the AB763s. I mean, aside from high watt, I don't think anyone's done a clean amp better than Fender, unless you want to count like the steel string swinger. But that's basically taking half of a Fender and mating it to half of an SVT. It's a very expensive proposition. I will suggest that we'll take about a 4-minute break because I need some more of this and some other stuff. I need to put up a back sign for this part of the videos. Everyone stretch your legs, get something from the kitchen, whatever you need to do, and we'll be back in just a few. Thanks for being here. And I'll even remember to mute it this time. Well, I am back. Jeremy Green. I was just joshing you. Just don't call me Kyle. I need to get a co-host for this thing because Dave can go off and get a beer and take a leak, and Mark just talks about Sweetwater and keeps everything going. Maybe I could train the dog. That I'm not ragging Mark. He's a cool guy, but yeah, it's fun trying to do all this yourself. David S says, can't find that pot taper video. Did I say A2? Yeah, it's A2 Guitars. It's Ann Arbor, Michigan. Let's see if I can find it for you. Let's see here. Let me open a different browser just in case I want to tempt fate. Oh, someone has come up with a new brand of guitars called A2 Guitars. Tell you what, this is done, I will find that video and I'll put a link in the comments and pin it. It's a really great series. David, someone I can't remember his name, really good, knowledgeable guitar tech. He builds guitars, and he did this for his clients, and I'm glad to share it with you guys. And it scrolled way down again. All right. Thanks, Ken Dominski. Asking a question about his dual Showman Odyssey. What do I think about the Trainwreck Type 3 Master Volume mod for a Showman? That is a cross line like you'd find in a mattress or some boxes. It's not my favorite master volume, particularly in an amp which has negative feedback like a Showman. I would do the Larmar. There are two variations on the Larmar, one which involves adding additional caps. Just do the one that works with the existing two-phase inverter output coupling caps. It's simple, works really well, and will be great in a Showman. Yeah, the flashback, if you get in and modify it through the app, you can get control of a lot of functions you can't do through the pedal itself. I had the flashback X4 for a long time. The X4 is a much more useful pedal because you can have more presets. The small version, you have your custom store preset and then some preset the factory stuff, and you just have to keep flipping pedals, flipping knobs around. But it's a good sound. People saying the audio was going in and out. Is it good now? Sorry, I'm behind. I'm trying to. I can only go at a certain pace because I don't want to miss questions if I can help it. Some of them I will miss just because I can't see all of them. I've never seen a VG series amp by Gibson. Rafiot says, Lyle, I followed your ground scheme on my JTM 45 build, and man, it did such a difference versus back of the pot. Thanks again. You're very welcome. I'm glad it worked. Science tends to work. Despite a lot of the forums, physics is physics. And I'm glad that physics worked for you. Yeah, the low E and low B strings. It sounds like you're having something vibrating. It could be a component in the amp and a bad solder joint. It could just be something loose in your hardware, or it could be you have a tweeter, in which case switch it off because tweeters suck. Hey, Mr. Buttons, thank you very much. And William Bach, thank you. Mr. Buttons says, are you a teddy bear? Says, any thoughts on the matchless Laurel Canyon? I have not played their Laurel Canyon. The mattresses that I have worked on tend to be overbuilt and overbiased, way too high. But uh, everything else about them has been fantastic. And if you don't need service, they're great. The trouble is, if you need service, everything becomes artificially difficult. John Williamson, yeah. Um, I will always strive to get all Beastie Boys references. I refer you to my speaker break-in video from last year that I think YouTube would not let me do much of because I was doing Paul's Boutique, because that's a great way to break in a speaker. Boom. The audio is crashing here, skipping in and out. I hope it's okay. Um, Let me know if that continues for and if it's widespread, because I only see my end of things. Any recommendations for a replacement 8-inch speaker model for a Vox VT20 Plus combo amp? Man, most 8-inch speakers kind of suck. I wouldn't throw too much money at that. The Jensen MOD series has got some 8 inches that are pretty good for about 25, $30. Let me grab one for you. TubeDepot.com. It's a good source for those. And we go to speakers, drivers, and Jensen 8-inch. The Mod 820 is $40, and you can get it in 4 ohms or 8 ohms. And if that works for you, that's about as good as you're going to get in an 8-inch speaker, particularly for a modeling amp. Christopher Butler talking about his home wiring issues that exhibited as buzzing in his amps. Soon after I bought the house, was replacing kitchen fluorescent fixture. There was spark voltage on neutral with the breaker off. Electricians since haven't seen that. Something odd. Something is drastically miswired in your house. For there to be potential on the neutral when the breaker is off, something is backwards, and that's not a good thing. Dr. Russ, PhD, says leaky prostate break for all you old guys. That was like my 5th cup of coffee before I took that break, so. I'm trying to get through. Gooden says he's never eaten a Yorkshire pudding or seen one being made, but I'd watch it. Britain has weird food names, toad in the hole or spotted dick. Well, first of all, Yorkshire pudding is delicious. Absolutely delicious. It's like a very eggy, custardy type of bread, like a muffin. And it's has a wonderful texture, and it's spongy, and it is the world's best gravy delivery method. So Yorkshire pudding and gravy, and you be happy. Spotted dick is a kind of cake, often with fruit in it, with a cream sauce. Also quite nice. Can also be with a rum sauce. Toad in a hole. It's usually sausage and mashed potatoes of some sort, I believe. And again, just pure comfort food. And you get to say, you want spotted dick or toad in a hole? So that's always fun. Thanks, Tube Workshop. I appreciate that. And I'm almost caught up to where I was right after the break. Bo Rip says, I want you to fix my 58 Baseman. Well, shoot me an email. I'm going to be opening the floodgates, so to speak, right after Christmas. And I would be delighted to fix your 58 Baseman. I'm almost caught up. It's very exciting watching some guy scroll through questions. I know that. Here's one that should be good and I think important to talk about. Are our RRPs or RRPs best EL34 amp for the bedroom warrior? Bedrooms, you're doing it wrong. Why do you need an EL34 amp for your bedroom if this is literally playing in your bedroom? Take the smallest single-ended 25-watt EL34 amp that's already louder than you want for your bedroom. I'm not a big believer in the bedroom amp concept because if you're really playing at those levels, you can play unplugged and hear it. Or if you have almost any computer made in the last 5 years and you have any kind of computer audio interface, you can plug into it. I could plug into this Focusrite and call up Logic because I have Logic because what I do, but GarageBand is free, and there are comparable apps available for with amp plugins, and I would certainly do that over having any EL34 amp for home literal bedroom use. I think people have gone crazy with the whole bedroom amp quest because the good ones like the Swart, the Space Echo thing, it's a $1,500-$1,600 amp for 5 watts. It's a great sounding little amp, but that's a lot of money to spend on something that can't be heard on a stage. I personally would not want anything smaller than a Princeton because even a great sounding, say Vibrochamp or a great sounding Swart, you can't really use that live. Maybe for some jazz gigs, but for other styles of music, not really. A Princeton is about where it starts, where you could potentially use it on stage, and people do, depending on your stage volume. So 12 watts minimum, 15, 20 better. 40 watts is about as much as you need. People, I don't view them as amplifiers so much as tone generators these days, but you need to at least be able to be heard with acoustic drums. Ray Lara Quente says your Tone Talk episode with Dave and Mark was great. Thank you very much. I'll tell Dave and Mark you said that. Please do another if possible. I'll also tell him you said that. I think Dave was saying maybe 6 months or so from now. I'm not going to be joining them as a regular, but it was flattering to be asked once. If I get invited back, it will either be a sign of great honor or that some more famous person canceled at the last minute. It's weird looking at all the people who've been on there, people I grew up reading in all the magazines, and then me. How did that happen? Anthony Mancini, the Anthony Mancini says, do you have any opinion on those high-end DIs versus line isolator boxes that are the flavor of the month, or is it snake oil? Do you mean like literal DIs we plug an acoustic guitar into on stage? I have been so out of that end of things for so long, I don't know. I know there's got to be something better out there than a Countryman 85, but I don't know about high-end DIs these days. I know about like the Avalon U5, which is a pretty good piece of kit, but I don't know about this month's flavor. Sorry, that's just a market I don't keep up with. William Bach says, you got to start calling me Bill. I feel like I'm in trouble when I hear William. Well, I go by the screen name that's up there, Bill. Sorry, Billy. Scroll too fast, even though I moved the mouse over there. B-side says, thoughts on noise at V4 in a deluxe reverb reissue. Tried rolling tubes, different tanks, etc. Next to test reverb pot and reverb driver. Thanks. Well, the first question is the noise at the recovery for the reverb, or is it at the mixer stage? Because there are two triodes in V4. So if you have a guitar, if you have the ability to, if you have or have the ability to make a 1/4 inch to RCA adapter, you can plug your guitar into the reverb return RCA jack on the bottom of the amp and see if you have this there. If you do, the noise is in the reverb recovery stage. And you can test this by using the foot switch that grounds out the grid of the first grid of V4. So you're only using the mixer triode. If you have noise there, you need to narrow it down to there. If you have noise in the recovery stage, then the noise is probably coming from the send, and you can verify that. A couple weeks ago, I showed how to connect an 8-ohm speaker to the reverb out, and you can hear what's being sent out and see if that's noisy. If that's noisy, the DRR reissue often has V3 miswired, such that on an old one they have the cathode going across the tube, and on the old one they have the grid going across the tube, and the plate loops around. On the reissue, they have the cathode going across the tube and the plate going across the tube, and the grid loops around, and that can cause all kinds of noise issues. If you rewire it to the old one where your cathode crosses and your grid crosses, not touching each other, but crossing the tube, and then you loop the plate, you can drastically reduce noise. If it's not that, then I would look at lead dress around V4 because the stuff for V5 and can interfere with that, the tremolo stuff. MFAM says, do you have any tube-powered stereo gear? Thoughts on tube versus solid state for vinyl? No, I don't, and I don't understand the whole appeal of vinyl. That said, certain records, Stevie Wonder, Talking Book, Rubber Soul, Revolver, in my mind, they sound better with the background noise you get from vinyl. In reality, they don't. It's just nice and it's pleasing to me. Vinyl is theoretically better than any other playback format for the first 2 or 3 plays, at which point the needle damages the vinyl, and at that point it begins to degrade. I think it's a lot of middle-aged men who at least aren't buying sports cars. I don't see the point of tube gear for hi-fi. I don't see the point of turntables unless you have 2 of them and a microphone. Ashdown 40, what a poorly made amp. Jeff Benson, you are correct. Many Ashdowns are terrible. One of the things Ashdown likes to do is they'll have 2 giant heat sinks, one for each side of the output section. And right between those 2 heat sinks, they have one little electric capacitor, just absolutely roasting. And guess which cap dies in those? Yeah, Lawrence, thanks for getting the transformer joke. I don't think the other guys got the transformer or Tashi station. What can you do? David S. says, on my 18-watt build, had fizzy decay on the notes. Remove shared cathode bypass, 50 microfarad on the EL84 pair. Fizzy decay gone. Thought? I'm not sure. I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. I don't think that the presence of the cathode bypass cap caused that fizzy decay. I do think it's likely that it revealed some other problem in the build, and it could be lead dress, could be a lot of things. You can try try adding like a 10 microfarad, then bumping up to 20, then 47, then 100. You can even go to 220 if you want, and see if the problem comes back as the capacitance is increased. But you're going to have a more, in general, you'll have a more stable output if the output cathode in a cathode bias amp has a bypass cap. It's going to make things more stable and give you an AC gain increase, which is why we like it. But because you're getting an increase in level as a result, it can reveal a problem somewhere else in the amp. I would want to know what the exact values in the phase inverter are. Maybe you've got a tail resistor that's acting up that can't handle the gain after that, or maybe you've incorporated negative feedback somehow. That's right, Chris. Toad in the hole is sausage cooked in a Yorkshire pudding. And then you just need another way to add gravy to it. So many wonderful uses for gravy. Robot Songs has any recommendations on an AC15 style circuit that's not Vox? Well, if it's not Vox, it's not really an AC15 typically. You're pretty much limited to Vox or matchless, and the matchless will cost more. There are others, but some of them I don't want to get into because this is a shitstorm. But why not go with the Vox? They invented it. They still do it well. Chris Robinson says, "What are your thoughts about chocolate olivers?" I do not know about chocolate olivers. I'll have to find out. Gregory Hill says, my self-made AB763 Vibrolux, everything works but the bright switches. When the volumes are at 0, there is a buzz until I switch one of the bright ones. Suggestions. If you're getting a buzz with the volumes at 0, it usually indicates a ground issue or something is miswired somewhere. I'm not sure what you mean. What you typed was, when the volumes are at 0, there is a buzz until I switch one of the bright one. So I'm not quite until I switch the bright cap on. You may have miswired your cap somehow. I'd have to see it. It should be something simple. There's just not that much that can go wrong in that area, but something seems to be wrong there. Gringo Pig says, I bought a 73 dual Showman for 500 pounds. That's what, about $900? Silverface 70s are bargains. Yeah. In doing the research for the Amps Under $2,000 video coming up, it's amazing how little the larger Silverface amps go for. And even some of the black panel non-mint larger amps are under $2,000 these days. You can barely find a Princeton reverb or deluxe reverb under $2,000, but you can find supers, you can find twins, you can find pros. So they're going to be making a big appearance on that Amps Under 2000 video. And you notice in the Amps Under 1000, there were some 79, 78 supers and twins there for the same reason. People don't want the larger amps, and pretty much starting with the Vibrolux and everything smaller, those are incredibly high these days, even for a 70s example. So the market is one thing as far as demand and what's in fashion. The actual quality / value of the amp itself is something entirely different. So now would be a great time to invest in 60s and 70s larger fenders, in my opinion, before the rest of the market snatches up all the small ones and people start to collect the larger ones. Even though a super reverb may always be larger than you need for a gig, it still sounds really good on 2. It keeps scrolling. Dang. Tube Workshop says, "Hey Lyle, regarding bedroom levels, don't want to advertise here, but perhaps you check out my hearing curve compensated post-phase inverter master volume sometime." I will be glad to. Um, Hearing curve compensated. Let me explain that for the folks back home. There's something called the Fletcher-Munson curve, or as he's calling it here, the hearing curve, which means that if you hear, say you're listening to something really loud, you have all the treble up here and all the bass here and all the mids here, and it's really loud and it sounds perfect. As you turn the whole thing down in level, it doesn't turn down like this. Instead, it turns down like this because our ears are really sensitive to the mid range, which is the part of the frequency range where the human voice is located. For example, my wife tunes me out. I'm kidding. She's fantastic. So the goal when you turn down a level is you want to compensate for that by increasing the treble and bass and leaving the mids alone as you turn the level down. And on people with stereos, that loudness button, that's what that does to varying degrees. And then we're doing strange dances on YouTube. Best quick example I can give. So really loud. So that's 70, 80 dB. You can hear the bass, you can hear the mids, you can hear the treble. You turn it down to 50 dB, you're not hearing the bass and treble as much, you're hearing those mids. So what he's talking about is ways to compensate for that as you decrease the level. And that can be complicated in an amp by the way the negative feedback can collapse. And then your presence does less or does nothing, or resonance, depending on the amp. I'll check it out. Snow White 77. If I want to if I want to run a 6L6 in my FF5F2 Princeton, what do I have to change? The power transformer and the output transformer. Um, it's not necessary. Due to the rest of the circuit being what it is, you also want to change the cathode bias. But a single-ended cathode bias 6L6 is not that much louder than a single-ended cathode bias 6V6. If you really want to get more, but you love that sound, buy or make another one just like it and run 2 of them together, or get a extension cab with for the first one. Double the number of speakers. I don't mean to sound dismissive. I mean, I understand I understand the desire to find out about such options, and people promise the moon on that kind of thing, but that's a much more radical change than people think. There are some amps out there that can take a 6L6 or a EL34 or a 6V6, and their cathode bias as a result. I have found and measured that typically both between the bias point decisions and the output transformer primary impedance, that circuit may be optimal for one type of tube, even though it will work with the others, but there is always a trade-off. And it just gets into a little bit of silly marketing. Rafiot says, any good mods you would do on a 1987 Marshall circuit? I gutted an old non-working Fender DeVille and planning to use the power transformer and output transformer, put an 87 circuit in there. Any suggestions for mods? For an 87, no, not really, other than the bright cap. Yeah, a couple. I'm gonna get to those separately. First of all, a Fender DeVille is not a good platform for that because the holes in the chassis that the tubes pass through are the wrong size holes to accept a tube socket. So you cannot put a good quality tube socket into that chassis. You'd have to buy a different chassis. Hopefully you are. At that point, you can use the power transformer and output transformer. That would not be the choice I would use. I wouldn't start from a Fender DeVille if I wanted to make anything really. But as ignoring all that, as far as tweaks to 1987, the post phase inverter master volume is a great thing to add. A resonance circuit can be very useful in that, either changing or making switchable the bright cap on the high treble channel can be really useful. I personally don't care for the one wire mod very much. You can look at the Randy Rhodes Marshall videos I put up for discussions on that. Though it can be done. I would make an 87 and 87. The switchable bright cap is nice, or just finding a different value because 5 nanofarad is kind of crazy these days. The master volume is almost a necessity, and it's so easy to add a resonance circuit to that, and it really makes it flexible because in a Marshall, so much of the drive is before the tone stack that due to the way the harmonic distortion is generated and the frequencies that exaggerates, you don't really have a ton of control over the low end when one of those is pushed. The low end control is definitely there. It's much more prevalent when you're playing clean. As you really crunch the thing, the low end control does less. That's when adding the resonance circuit in the negative feedback can add back some low end control when driven. Brendan Gauntner says, "Hey, Lyle." Hey, Brendan. Any good or bad opinions on the 68 Custom Pro Reverb since the 68 Custom Deluxe is hissy? Any suggestions on a 6L6 1x12 combo? Well, I have neither good nor bad opinions on the 68 Custom Pro Reverb because I have not had one come in yet. I fear that it will be just as wonderful as the other 68 Customs, which are all noisy, gimmicky things. Maybe it's fantastic. I'm pretty sure that for the price, though, the Cerebella would kill it. So I would think the Cerebella would be the way to go. And I'm trying to get my hands on one for the amps under $2,000 video. You know, it's the 40-watt clean with reverb and effects loop. It's kind of one of the most commonly stated goals. 40 watts, 1x12, single carry. And I know that it's going used for 16 to 1800, and I imagine that the Fender is in that range new, maybe more. And I would take John Suhr's stuff any day over what Fender's putting out these days. Eric Filsinger says, I can't find anything significantly bad about my 2015 Tyler JT14, though I got it used as I think it's worth the $1,700 price if you compare it to the 64 hand-wired Fender. Well, Eric, the Tylers that I've had in have been of two sorts. One have been really badly constructed Weber kits. Those are garbage. The others have been Seriatone kits that say Tyler on the front, then are sold to you for more than the Seriatone would cost you, and they're sold to you as made in the U.S. So I think that stinks. That said, the Seriatone amps, as Seriatone builds them, Tyler's not building them, Seriatone is building them. They're fine amps. I just don't understand the need to pay extra for it through a brand that has deceptive marketing. Dr. Paul Zero says, any thoughts on adding a 470K grid stopper to the phase inverter on a black panel Princeton? Yes, I do it all the time. I also decrease the 1 meg grid leak at that same point to 470K, and the 22 nanofarad in front of that down to 4.7 nanofarad. That combination of three things makes the cathode phase inverter much better behaved. There's some other things you can do, but those three together are a simple thing to do that make a big difference. And the nice thing about it is you can even leave the old 1 meg in place, just put another 1 meg in parallel across it, so you're not really changing original components. It's not something I do without owner's permission. and I'm more inclined to do it on a reissue or a 70s than most 60s, but it works really well. B-side, I'm sorry that the voice was cutting out during the answer about the noise in his V4 in his Fender. I'm sorry that I don't know why it was cutting out. I don't know if it was cutting out for everyone. I'll have to go back and listen. I know it's not my gear, um, though I'm suspicious of one of the apps I'm using as far as the phone cutting out. Though it could be this USB 2 cable, but I think most of the audio and the blocky video that happens occasionally, that's all happening through my delightful ISP. Hey, Chris Butler. Yeah, my subscribers are awesome. I'm glad they've been able to help you further. Um, some of this stuff, it's one of those things where, I just can't take too much time to devote to just one thing, but I'm glad that they're able to help you. Some very knowledgeable people here. I do miss cover art and liner notes very much. Gary Conti says, totally a non-tech, but love your channel. Thank you very much, Gary. I have an early 90s Defender Twin 65 reissue. There's a loud pop when taken out of standby. And if I hold a note / chord, the output is crackly and fades. Any ideas? If it's an early 90s, then the probably time to change the filter caps. Probably has several bad or iffy solder joints at this point. These are might sound scary to the end user, but these are the day ins and Y problems for an app tech. Almost every reissue Fender we get in, especially those that are getting up there in age, we expect to refill the solder joints, change out the electrolytics, maybe a bad jack or pot here or there, or something minor. Your app can be transformed just by a thorough cleaning, some basic reflowing, changing out the old filter caps, and tightening all the hardware. So I wouldn't worry about it, but I would definitely take it to a tech. David S says, Excalibur 15 update, please. I hope to have something for you soon, but I am still doing some prep work before I can begin the next stage. For instance, some of the design decisions I made on the existing one were because I was using the Mojo Tone chassis. And now that I'm looking like I'm going to be able to have a custom chassis made, there's some other design opportunities I want to take advantage of. So I don't want to go to the chassis guy and say, I'm thinking about doing this or this or this or this. How much would all these different things cost? Because that's a whole bunch of different designs that I have to pay for. I want to have everything set in stone and say, I have an accurate to within a thousandth of an inch 2D CAD, DWX, DXW, or G, whatever it is, DWG files. Take this, turn it into a 3D model, and you'll know where to add extra metal for all the bins and stuff, and this will be ready to go into production. And then we talk about prices. So I've got to do some more homework. There's a lot of stuff that goes into this, and it's happening. Chris Carlson says, hey, Lyle, saw this Studio Vintage 20 video. Any recommendation for a plexi at that size or smaller? Yeah, Friedman's got a Dirty Shirley. If he's got a 20-watt version of that, that would do it. He's got a 40-watt. It's in about the same price range used. Either, it depends on how authentic a plexi do you want it to be. But like the Dirty Shirley would do it. The Runt 20 would kind of do it, though. The topology is more JCM 800. Uh, the Marshall 18 watt, I think you can get those for like 16 to $1,800 used, and I have a used 1974 X 18 watt that are brand spanking new Studio Vintage 20, totally different amps. I know the 18 watt 1974X does not sound like a 18 or 20 watt version of a 1987 or 1959. Neither does the 20 watt um, lead. I think it's called the lead and bass, which is another good option, right at the top end of that range. But they are really good sounding amps, and I'd rather have an amp that sounds really good, uh, doing what it really is than something's pretending to be something it's not. Um, Come to think of it, I think the London from from 65 amps, you might be able to find some of the London or London Pros in that same price range, which are doing have a lot of overlap with the Marshall 18 watt. Those would be good choices as well. I need to remember that for when I do the Amp Center 2000 video. Nola Rock says, "Coming to see you if you're up for it. Shoot me an email." And Elvis, he's booked Graceland. Well, you have fun. I have never been, nor will I ever go to Graceland, but the rest of Memphis is awesome. Avoid Beale Street too. That's just like I don't know Memphians who go to Beale Street unless they have a gig there. Fred Scott says, "Is the Telos ever going to make a reappearance, or has anyone ever reached out to have it to you to have it produced on a large scale?" I don't think it's going to make a reappearance. If it does, it would have to be some other company making it. I just can only do so many things, and I'm just not going to get back into pedal manufacture. I'd like to license the design, have them available to people, but so far people have not been beating down the door. Jet Cities, if you do some work on a Jet City, it can be made into a pretty good sounding little amp. Um, and I'd say, yeah, a Jet City, if you get lucky and don't have any problems with the power switch dying, could be a much better sounding amp than the Studio, uh, the SV20, the Marshall, certainly for a lot less money. Um, it was a cheap little amp designed by Mike Soldano, and the design is really good. It's just that the uh, power switch is usually kind of flimsy. The lights can be problematic if those jacks and bulbs come loose. All the wires can break. Anyway, I've got a video showing that and how it was fixed. And yes, they sound quite good for the price. There are actually some crates from the '90s which sound pretty good too. Can't remember the models. I've got a crate that just came in. If it's one of those, I'll be showing you next week. Chris McKinney says, "I have an AC30 hand wired that seems like the chassis is microphonic. Is that indicative of anything specific?" It would usually mean you've got a microphonic tube, and that's just tapping the chassis is picking that up. So I would. There's only 3 preamp tubes in there. It's probably one of those. Just open it up, slide it out, and gently tap on each tube with the amp on. You'll probably find it. But the chassis rarely will there be something so microphonic in the amp that touching the chassis makes a component ring out. Usually, it's just that vibration is being transmitted to the tube. Wes Chilton says you should reach out to Keeley to revive the Telos. Robert's a great designer. I'm not sure that if he wants to deal with someone else's designs. A, B, he's got a lot of overdrives out there, so I don't want to push that. How about a collab with GHS? I don't know, Josh. I don't know how his stuff is built. It seems that I mean this nicely. it seems that his aesthetic is very different from my own. His stuff is very, very, very basic looking and very, very. I built this, at least on the outside, and I was trying to go for more, and I would want to continue more of a polished look. So I don't know if that would be a good aesthetic match, but I have nothing bad to say about JHS products or Josh as a person. It may be just the collaboration of both our dreams, and we just don't know it yet. But I don't think that he's out there looking for things to license. B-side said, "Do you ever walk with your feet 10 feet off of Beale? If you come to Memphis, don't sing that song to anyone. Don't mention that goddamn song to anyone. We are sick to death of that. Tell you what, you want to walk from Union Avenue to the gates of Graceland? Go right ahead. You'll get killed about 30 times, and it's about a 15-mile walk. So it's just so much about that song, and it's awful." Brendan Gauntner says, "Any preferred treble booster pedals? I was thinking of buying the Keeley Java Boost." Um, I haven't tried that many. I've mostly rolled my own because I like to be able to vary the low pass or the high pass. High pass. I like to be able to vary it so it's not quite so treble booster, so much upper mid booster. And I like futzing with things. I'm sure that the Keeley Java Boost does a good job. I just haven't any experience with them. Colby Jack, one of my favorite cheeses. I have a Rivera Venus 6. I bought it New years ago. Right away, it started going through tubes. One day, the tubes were going red. A tech changed resistance cap. Maybe a resistor and a cap. That seemed to have fixed it. Yet it still seems to go through tubes every year or so and seems noisy. Thoughts on the amps and what fixes they tend to need? Well, I apologize. I have not ever had a Rivera Venus 6, and I don't know what model that is. Paul tends to design good things. I don't always agree with what he chose, the decisions he made as far as what the sound should be, but he always achieves it well. There's nothing wrong, objectively wrong with his apps. Those are all subjective differences. So I'm sure that whatever is wrong with your Venus could be addressed by any good tech who saw that amp, but I have not seen that amp, so I can't speculate. But it won't be something monumental and crushing because Paul would not have put out something terrible. This has got to be one little thing has gone wrong. RRP says favorite tape delay emulation pedal. I'm not a big fan of tape delay. I used to use let's see, the last three delays I've owned. I've got the Keeley Halo. I've got I had the Flashback X4 that had some pretty good stuff on it. Before that, I had I guess the world's best tape delay emulation pedal, the Strymon El Capitan. El Capitan. And then before that, I had something. I don't even remember what I had before that. I've had so many delays. I'm not a big fan of the tape thing. I thought I would be. That's why I bought the El Capistan. I liked the fact that I could get a little bit of dirt dialed up on it, which would kind of get more towards the Memory Man side of things. But I always thought that the modulation was pretty weak. So I guess if you really want tape delay emulation, the best one I've heard continues to be the El Capistan, but there's a lot of delays on the market in the last 5 years that I have not heard. Daryl Levenwolf says, been inside a modern Laney supergroup. I have not, only vintage, sorry. Shed says, my amp, Swart, produces this sort of fuzz on the tail end of some bass notes. the amp value on 2 out of 10. Anything an end user can try to troubleshoot something like that. It could be a tube. Um, I would start with preamp tubes. Chris McKinney says, "How can I get a hold of you to talk about pedal licensing and building?" Well, shoot me an email. I will look for it. I am almost permanently swamped right now. I'm having a hard time keeping up, but I will look for that. I'm going to take another 4-minute break. And then we'll maybe do another 30 minutes. Is that cool with everyone? 2.5 hour live streams once a week seem like a good goal to set for ourselves because I do have a bunch of stuff I need to get to. But my back teeth are floating, so back in about 4. Colby Jack says, I hope to get a car Sportsman. Good choice. Cars are well-built amps. I think they're uh, ridiculously over-glued inside. It's not glue, it's silicone. I think they're built kind of to a silly over-the-top standard, but they tend to sound really good. So if you like the sound of a car Sportsman, go for it. This is that speaker from that Gibson yesterday. Looks huge on the camera. It's a 10-inch. After this video, I'm going to take it to Dave Halford. Rob Halford's a very different guy. Dave Halford at Halford Loudspeakers to see if this can be reconed or if, in his opinion, it's worth reconing. I don't even know what it is. It could be a vintage gem, or it could be one of those, well, Mr. Johnson, please come to the office kind of speakers from that era. Put that up there for right now. Yeah, the Deluxe Memory Man is such a fantastic sounding thing, but it's such a fragile thing, and lots of things can go wrong, and the power supply is kind of awful for modern use. I think the Keeley Halo, in conjunction with something to get that coloration, can be a really nice thing. The EP Boost would be a very popular choice for that. Wes says you have to play The Girl from Ipanema on your breaks. I'm afraid if I play anything recognizable like that, we'll get copyright strikes and videos will get blocked. But yeah, I need to see if there's some way. If I had a third-party app for this, all the streaming apps, that the bigger channels use, you can say, all right, I'm going to switch to this camera, or we're going to switch to this source, or we're going to play this video or audio here. I don't think I can do that with the one that's just built into YouTube like this. I'm definitely doing this the cheap way. Let's see. Scroll too fast. I love delays too, Wes. I used to have tons. I've had the 2290. I've had the STD3K. Real sleeper rack unit, the Korg Deal 8000. I think that was what it was called. That was really great. I had Eventide Eclipse. I've had so many different pedals. But in general, I like 3 or 4 good presets. And the Keeley Halo lets you do that in a very small form factor that's really easy to navigate. Really good user interface on that. I'll be featuring that again pretty soon. That's another one. This whole video started off with questions about how I demo things, and there are a lot of demo videos of the Keeley delay out there that show all the fantastic sounds you can get with it. Mine was very much, let's tweak this, let's tweak that. This is how this works. And Robert liked that video enough that he actually sent me one, for which I'm very grateful. And so I did not rush out to do another review of that, because that would be one of the few things that I feature that's this video is sponsored by, a paid promotion kind of thing, because Robert sent me that pedal as thanks. That was not a condition of me doing the review. I had no expectation of that, and I did my review before I got the in-kind donation from Mr. Keeley. So when I do feature that pedal in future videos, I'll put a disclaimer on there. But it takes more than a pedal to buy my opinion. My opinion of that pedal I was going to buy one anyway, so I was very glad that I did not, in fact, have to. But I would recommend it to many people because I recommended it to myself. And I also don't use a lot of effects in the videos for the reasons stated. When I demonstrate an amp, I want to show what the amp sounds like, not what the amp sounds like in some ethereal other dimension. Colby Jack says, I've just recently started watching your videos. Great. Thank you very much. Would you consider doing a complete mod improvements on a new Princeton and shipping it to me, paid in advance, of course? I would, get get in touch with me right after Christmas. That's when I'm gonna start, um, taking in things again, and that would be one where I could yeah, I could we could arrange to have a new one bought from wherever and shipped to me, and I would do all the stuff and then ship it to you. I'd be glad to. I don't know the Keeley Mag Echo, but I bet it's really good. Thank you very much, Colby Jack. That's very kind of you. Um, so the Echoes is the a more focused on tape emulation. Okay, that's good to know. I just much prefer the modulated delays to the tape delays myself. I don't use chorus anymore because it was like a 5-year process where I had to wean myself away from using chorus all the time. Remember, I'm older than a lot of you guys, and chorus was a pried out of my cultures kind of thing for a long time, and I weaned myself away from it. And now, so giving myself modulated delay is a luxury, but it's kind of like I don't know, giving codeine to an alcoholic. I was like, I like that. So you have to be very careful. My channels changed Dave's business. That's cool to know. I didn't know that, Scott. Um, yes, yeah, Dave does fantastic, fantastic work. I guess you deleted that. Maybe I shouldn't have mentioned it. Right after I replied to your post, Scott, you retracted the message. So, but Dave does fantastic work. If he's getting a whole bunch of guitar speakers, I am glad because people need to know about good recoders. Here's an interesting question. RRPs says, if the home player shouldn't get an amp, that's not what I said. Should they bother getting pedals to screamers, fuzz face, etc.? Just getting modelers for everything? Well, for some guys, yeah, modelers for everything is fine. That's not what I said, though. I don't think that you should necessarily have any amp with EL34s for a bedroom amp, which usually means that you don't want any real volume. It seems counterproductive. I do think that people should have amps because um, everything about how an amp responds is very different from how modelers respond, at least up to a certain price point. Most people are not playing fractal audio um, Axe FX 3s, the $2,000 and up stuff, where they don't have a fully loaded Kemper system, et cetera, et cetera. More guys are using the katanas, the catalysts, the HX Stomp, or even the Helix is like the top tier price of what a lot of guys are experiencing. And if you learn to play guitar into even a fairly good in the lower end of things, you're not learning how to play into an amp. And should you ever need to play into a tube amp, you'll have no control over your right hand. You will have no playing an amplifier really teaches you a lot about dynamics and about control. And for certain styles, you could grow up playing modeled Marshalls and Maces and all this stuff, high gain stuff. Then you get on a stage with a real one, and you're going to have feedback all over the place, and your muting's going to be terrible. I really do think that amps are a different playing experience than the digital stuff can give you. The digital stuff can be great as a tool, as a device, as a different means of expression. I don't think yet, as of December of 2022, that they are replacements for good tube amps. Any experience with adding a master volume to a 5FA8 Tweed Twin? Ed Myers asks, opinions. There's no reason you can't. I would not mod an actual 58, 59, 60 5E8, 5FA8, 5F8A Tweed Twin. But if you have a kit or reproduction, etc., yeah, it's same output section pretty much as a Marshall. Same LRMR works really well, and then you can use it at much more realistic output levels. Let's see. Chris Butler says, after the chorus tone I used to have with my Roland GP100 and stereo rack rig, nothing else has sounded right to me. Also only use modulated delay now. Yeah, we had to wean ourselves off the 80s, and modulated delay is just a little sweet taste of what we of the life we used to lead. But I do love the way modulated delay works, because if you haven't played around with it, your dry stays dry, with no pitch on that. Just the repeats get modulated, and it's a very different sound, but it's beautiful. Listen to anything Daniel Lanois has done since 1986 to hear a great example of that. Yeah, young Debs has only been playing guitar for a couple of years, but I think modeling is great for finding what you like and going from there. Modeling absolutely has a role, and I was considering getting some modeling thing here for my own use, even for just kind of this thing. Like if I wanted to show a guitar in a live stream, it's much easier because the bleed from mic to mic makes it difficult doing this kind of thing. I probably need to get some kind of load box with IRs for that, really, so I can say, all right, I'm playing the 66 Super Reverb today, and not have to deal with a microphone making this thing be problematic. I've been playing around with plugging straight into the laptop and using the amp plugins in Logic, but even on a hyper fast MacBook Pro here, there's a little bit of a lag, which is noticeable. I only spent about 15 minutes futzing with that. I might be able to get the latency even lower, because it does have insane processing power. But I've played a lot of digital standalone things where the lag has been like, just feels off. That's mostly 10 years ago. Mostly the lag is not really an issue. Though on some things, as you add a whole bunch of engines at once, you can begin to feel it. Jeremy Green says, I have a 90s JCM 2000 dual super lead that is stuck on the Ultra channel, and I can't switch to classic. Neither the foot switch nor button selector works. The channel switching uses the low voltage supply in that model, and that model the low voltage supply has capacitors and a bridge rectifier and a whole bunch of diodes and stuff in there, and resistors, any one of which can be defective. And if that circuit is faulty, then the channel changing will not work with a button selector or the foot switch. It's very easy to fix typically, but until it is fixed, that problem will only get worse. So I would suggest taking your amp to a tech. Yeah, I like John Nathan Cordy is really good, Chris. That said, and I say this knowing that someone may tell him I said this, and he may hear me say this. When I hear his videos, and he's not the only one, and he's not necessarily at fault. In fact, he did a video the other day, or I saw it the other day. I'm not sure when he recorded it, demonstrating the Revstar, the Yamaha Revstar, compared to Les Paul. So humbuckers and P90, very different scale lengths, very different guitars in a lot of respects. They sounded almost identical through his HX. I don't know if his HX Stomp or Helix setup. Whereas I know, this is not me, this is not a supposition. I know for a fact that if you were playing both those guitars into a deluxe reverb, both those guitars into an 18-watt Marshall, both those guitars into, you name X analog tube amp here, they would sound and respond very differently. A lot of the digital stuff tends to be homogenizing. I bet you would still hear a difference between a Tele bridge pickup and a Les Paul neck pickup through that, but his Les Paul sounded pretty much the same as the Yamaha Revstar he was playing. And again, I'm not faulting John specifically on that. I think that's an important thing for people to listen for, because if I plug this Strat into the AC15, if I plug that 335 in the AC15, or even the 335 versus the SG, all three of those guitars sound very different. If I'm going through digital, especially with delays and compression and reverb added to it, it begins to homogenize. Wes Chilton says, hey, in Logic, you need to turn on the low latency button to play straight into the computer as a control on the top that might not be set up. I thought I was messing with the latency issues, but I'll check and see if there's a switch. Logic is a great program, but it is not the most logical user interface. I come to this having used Cakewalk and Cubase for many decades. Logic has some things that, like, why on earth would you ever put that there? So I'm still discovering things, but I'll look for that. Thanks, man. Scott, I have not gone through the setup of the new soldering station yet. I'm hoping to do that this weekend. I just don't want to kill it, because you have to calibrate the tips. And until that happens, I could burn something. And this is not me being ungrateful. This is me respecting what you the new Hako that you sent me, and not wanting to break it. And also, I've been playing catch up. It looks like I'm all relaxed here. I've been working, and the old Hako already works, and I don't have to think about it. So I know that when I do get the new one set up, it's going to be fantastic and a joy, and probably speed up my workflow. So maybe tonight I can get that thing set up. Stephen Burliant says, hey, Lyle, what are safe boutique brands I can consider, i.e. Carr, Swart, Tone King, Milkman, that are built to their price point in the UK, which limits my options with silver-faced Fenders and vintage amps? Of that list, I can tell you that Carr is safe. Swart is safe. I know that old Tone Kings are safe. I don't know whether Tone Kings made by BAD, the current ones, are. I have not seen inside a Milkman. I would love to say that they're safe. I cannot say that they are. For the record, I'm not saying that they're not fantastic. They may be fantastic. I don't have direct experience of that. Sir, Friedman, Germino. I don't know if there are any UK more specific brands. One of the trouble with boutique amps, as far as me getting to try them, is that the more boutique they are, the fewer of them there are in the world in general. And I'm operating out of Memphis, Tennessee. So there may be a whole bunch in LA and New York, but they haven't hit this market yet. And if they do hit this market, I tend to encounter them once they've had a problem, and typically only if they've had a problem once the warranty period is expired. So when a new company comes out, it may be 5 years before I have experience of it. I'd love for Milkman to come in next week, and because it turns out it had a bad reverb driver tube, and I can say this thing is fantastic. I can't say that for sure. I know that they have a good enough reputation that you should look into them, but I do not know. Sorry, I can't make up answers just to pretend to be the expert on everything. But of those four that you list, Carr and Swart are quite good. Yeah, the saturated lead tones, Chris, that's part of what I was talking about, and I'm not a big fan of saturated lead tones in general. Stephen Brilliant, also appreciate your honest opinion about the Deluxe Reverb 64 hand-wired last week. Managed to sell it for the price he paid. Very good. I'm glad to hear that. That is a hideously overpriced amp. Um, and thank you, Wes, about the latency email. James Bless says, "Thank you for your channel. Much appreciated." Thank you, James, for for sticking with us. And what is my opinion on two rock amps? They seem to be pretty good. The ones I've had in have been either Dumble clones or Dumble inspired. Overall, the build quality is pretty good. I'm not a huge fan of Illinois capacitors that they use, but the ones series and the ones Fender uses. Um, and I can't say whether they're overpriced because I don't know how many employees they have or what their overhead is like, or what CE certification they have to pay for, et cetera, et cetera. I will say that they seem to the demand for them is such that if they have a slightly inflated price, I think that can almost be justified because that's how the world works. I think that their reputation, I mean, I'm a tiptoe around and up to the point I want to make. I think that if Fender and Marshall were still building amps worth a damn these days, Two Rocks would not seem so fantastic in comparison. I would rate their build quality about the same as a Dr. Z, though their reverb implementation is better. And they have prettier cosmetics, and some of those prettier cosmetics take some money to achieve. You know, if Dr. Z were the starting point for an acceptable build quality in the amp world today, then Two Rock would be maybe a little step above that. Sadly, Dr. Z, for all the quibbles I have with how they're built, are so much better built than 85, 90% of the amps on the market that it makes the Two Rock stuff seem godlike in comparison. And that sounds harsh, I know. But I mean, if you look at the wiring inside a 66 Fender Twin, it's every bit as good. That's what amps of a certain price point used to be like, all of them. Fender got bought out short at that point, and CBS started saving money and making little changes here and there. And a 76 Twin inside looks nothing like a 66 Twin. A 76 Twin is infinitely better than most amps made today. So I get a little bit jaded from my perspective. Robert M says, is replacing tube sockets usually expensive or labor intensive? It's going to depend on the amp. If it's a Marshall where all the tube sockets are riveted, or some old Gibsons, it can be very expensive. If it's a Fender from the 60s or 70s, nah, it's pretty easily done because they use sheet metal screws. And on other companies that use machine screws and nuts, or machine screws that go into PEM nuts in the chassis, again, it can be quite easy. But a lot of amp companies use rivets to attach things, and that's when it gets difficult. Tamaz Baran says, in the last years being in Europe, I settled on Engel Gig Masters and Cook amps. Have you had a Brunetti in the works? I love your channels. Learn a lot about amps by watching your videos. Thanks very much. No, I've not had any Ingles or Brunettis. I have had one Coke or Cock amp in. Side note on that, aside from, all right, let's all say cock together. Okay, let's get that giggle out of the way. I don't know whether it's pronounced cock or coke or kirk or kirk. My family has some Keaches, and the Keaches are related to the Cokes in this country, and the spelling used to be much the same. Some of them had some umlaut, some of them didn't, and some of them added e's. And um, our branch became Keach's, even though it was originally Kirks or Cokes, whatever. I'm not going to tell an actual German viewer this, but for Americans, I'm at least approaching the issue. So I never know whether it's Greg Koch or Koch or Kirk or whatever. But the Koch amp was well built for the price point. I wasn't nuts about the pots and some of the it had a busted reverb pot and a little bit labor intensive to get to because the way the boards were stacked. But for the price, it was a well built, very good sounding amp. Uh, Nick Larson says, "Hey Lyle, could you explain what each knob does on a Marshall DSL 40 CR? Dialing it in, and I'm curious how they all interact. Channel volume, channel gain, master volume. The master volume is the global master volume, so that'll affect the total output of the amp, regardless of which channel it's on. The gain and the channel volume and the channel gain, that's for that channel by itself. So the channel gain is how much crunch you get, and the channel volume is how much the output is master volume just for that channel. So you can have your clean channel, then you have your high gain channel, which has its own channel master, and then you have the global master volume. So you may say, all right, I'm going to set my clean with the master volume on 10. That's as loud as clean as I'll ever get out of this amp. And then I'm going to dial in my crunch tone on the other channel. All right, I like it right there. Let's put it at 2 o'clock. That sounds great. When we go back to the clean channel, away I'm too loud. I'll turn the channel master down until I'm either the same volume as the clean or just a little bit louder than clean. Then I have the relationship between the two channels. So I'm all set. And then I take the amp to a stage and I'm told, you're way too loud. I'm not going to turn down, I don't have to turn down the volume on the clean channel, channel master on the dirty channel. I can just turn down the global master volume. Say, okay, I'm too loud. I'll turn that down to 10 o'clock. Is that good? So that's how that works. Metropolis amps are great, and George is a cool guy. He needs to. Has he been on Tone Talk? If not, he should, or they should be on his thing. Thanks, Hybrid John, about saying my recordings sound great. I do try to as accurate as I can be. The recent magnetones are interesting, Shed says. Some of them are really good. Some of them have some flaws, but overall, I don't hate them. I have no scorn for them. I have mild reservations, but the typical magnetone is much better built than the typical Fender these days. So. That said, the Fender Reissue series can be made into really good amps. The Reissue, that's not the Blues or the Hot Rod series. Ken Nemitsky says, I'm setting up a 2x12 American light cab, and I was thinking of pairing an WGS ET65 and a G12 CS. Any thoughts on how they might work together? I don't think you'd be very happy with that pairing because the G12 CS, the whole shtick is that it rolls off highs, and the ET65 has more highs than that, so you're going to hear more highs. And I don't think the ET65 and the regular G12C would be a good pairing either because the G12C series, but the C and the CS have a mid-range scoop, whereas the ET65 is flat. I think those might fight each other. My shop cab that you've heard a lot of has got an ET65 and a Veteran 30, and those speakers kind of complement each other pretty well. I could be wrong that the G12 CS and the ET65 might be a fantastic pairing, but intuitively it doesn't seem right to me. You can talk to the guys over at Warehouse. Maybe they've tried it and they're going to like, that's great. Chris Butler says, not sure if you mentioned this at the outset. Is this going to be your normal time slot going forward? I don't know because Saturdays I can have other family commitments and such, but this Saturday seemed like a good time to do it, so I chose this, and at least this time This time I'm not competing with Pete Thorne. So Pete's very lucky that I let him have some viewers tomorrow because, people can't handle my mad skills compared to Pete Thorne. I don't know. It's like we talked about last time. It's hard to find a regular slot. For all I know, I'm cutting into someone's time with kazoo lessons. So, all right, Greg Appendage. What an odd name, Jason. Thanks, Scott. Thanks for joining and for the donation and all that stuff. Raphael talked about the Excalibur a little bit earlier in this. I'm getting all my ducks in a row for that. Nick Larson says, thanks for the explanation. When you turn up channel volume, is that working with the preamp tubes or the power amp tubes? Yes. The channel volume and the master volume in that series are both pre-phase inverters. So you're mostly going to be affecting preamp tubes in that. But that amp has got enough preamp gain that works just fine. Cock pronounced like that takes some chutzpah. Any experience with Univox amps? No, I do not. Sorry. Yeah, Pete is very safe from my guitar technique blazing. It is a pretty Strat, isn't it? I don't usually like blue guitars, but this one's nice. It'll have to go home later this week. A little preview of the next video on this where I show how this was installed and set up. At this point, the neck has almost no relief. It's like a piece of paper above those frets. And that's actually something that I like. But you can only get away with that on a neck with impeccable frets. And the frets on these are all dinged and banged up. So I'm letting it sit for the day. And then because it's been without strings for a while and it's got the new bridge, letting it find where it wants to be. Then I'm going to give it a little bit more relief just to make up for the fret wear that's on there. And then I'm going to go in here and lower a lot of the nut slots and make sure that they all angle towards the tuners because many of them are too high, which affects intonation, makes them go sharp in the first couple of frets. And there's just an awful lot of excess material here. And so they're a little bit buried, but it's playing so much better. Carl Schricker says, sorry if it's been asked and answered. What are your impressions on current offerings? I have not heard one. I would love to. Beautiful. I was talking to a friend of see a B-side. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who's also a very good tech. He's up in Canada. Chris Church, for those who know Chris or know of Chris. He's up in the Toronto area. But Bartel's stuff is just insanely over the top beautiful. He decides, hey, I want something that'll hold these two wires run next to each other at a specific angle. Well, he goes and 3D prints it, and he makes his own knobs. Insane, over the top, beautiful. God, they have to be expensive. I'm not entirely sure that there would be any real demonstrable sonic benefit to having everything done so crazily high. But there's always that knowledge that the owner would have that everything in here is just flawless. So he's building a Rolls Royce or a Bentley. And I guess my best efforts are more towards the Porsche end of things. I want it to go really fast and handle corners really well and look great, but it doesn't have to have a stainless steel T-service included. I don't know. That analogy got away from me. But I imagine Mark's amps sound great, and they should last a really long time. It's truly an insane level of craftsmanship and skill that he uses. 2:35, so we're a little bit over the 2.5 hour point. Greg Hill says, integrity and experience is appreciated. Found it. Thank you, Greg. On his Vibrolux, the bright switch on the normal channel was faulty. Thanks. Yeah, it had to be something simple like that. And that kind of thing can happen. So I think all this talk of Greg Koch and Mr. Pete Thorne has me feeling very self-conscious about my playing. So I'm going to go practice a bit. Actually, I got to run that speaker over to Dave Halford first, and then I'm going to practice a bit. Then I've got an old Silvertone and an old airline to take a look at. Where did that static come from? Might be my cable. But you know, it's weird playing on the same internet that Greg Koch and Pete Thorne inhabit. I feel like such a pretender. See you guys. And thank you, Thomas. Everyone have a good week. I'll talk to you soon. Bye. I say dramatic buys, and then it asks me to confirm.